Welcome back to the Pink Nest podcast. Today's conversation is one of those that will definitely stay with you. My guest is someone who I really deeply admire and someone whose work has transformed how we think about inclusion and access in arts and culture, and whose story is actually a masterclass in resilience, creativity, and systemic change. I'm joined by Suzanne Bull MBE. She's originally from Essex, who moved to London over 30 years ago, drawn by the bright light and music, as she says. Susanna, it's really an honor to have you here today, and thank you so much for being here with me. Let's start at the very beginning. How would you describe the atmosphere that you grew up in?
Thank you for having me, Nika. It's a real honour. Thank you for that lovely introduction as well. It's really sweet. So I grew up in Essex, and it was Brentwood, which is where they filmed The Only Way is Essex, which is very interesting. But when I lived in Essex, there wasn't that much to do. It was just like a regular country town, really. But I really enjoyed growing up there. I made some nice friends who are still my friends now. My dad still lives in Brentwood, and my sister still lives in Essex, but another part of Essex. And I went to a secondary school where there was a lot of emphasis on music and playing and learning instruments, and also a lot of emphasis on creative, like writing and the creative arts. So in that respect, I was really, really lucky to be at a school that invested so much of that in those kind of subjects. I know it can be very different now. So I really enjoyed my childhood, and I really enjoyed living in Essex. I was always surrounded by music. My mum and dad really liked music as well. When I was about 13 or 14, I got into The Cure. My best friend gave me a copy of The Head on the Door, and I never really looked back since. Like, The Cure is still my favourite band. And when I got to about 16 or 17, I started to travel to London with my best friends, like independently, and we started to scour the music shops, the independent music shops that were in behind kind of Soho, so sort of in Hanway Square, around that Hanway kind of area, and I came across a lot of vinyl, and possibly started buying every Cure record that there ever was. But I did also like the Cocteau Twins and all sorts of other those, not just goth bands, but indie bands as well. And that's where my love for music kind of grew. And I thought, in terms of, I know my A levels in the end were not in music, because you had to be really good at your classical instrument if you want to do A level music. I wasn't good enough in clarinet and piano. There's so many people that do those instruments. So I hadn't even reached like grade 8. But I thought that by going to like a university in London or a college in London, I was doing languages, I was good at languages, I would still be able to be surrounded by music. So that's where I was kind of heading. It was like, London, I think, is a good place to learn about music, do music in my own way, that kind of thing. So that's what really got me to London. But I also think that when I was a very small baby, and when I finally came out of hospital, because I was born with my impairment, I used to have to travel on the tube every 2 weeks, I think it was, with my nan and my mum taking me to Great Ormond Street Hospital. And I wonder if the tube and that sensation of being on the tube, I wonder if that left an imprint on me as a child. And obviously I always had my treatment or went to appointments in London And if I wasn't using the underground, I wasn't a baby in arms being carried, then my mum and dad would drive me to London. And I think driving from Essex to London and then back again, maybe that had this kind of imprint on me that this was a really big, exciting place to be. And maybe it was that had really influenced me to move to London. But I did actually live in Europe for a time as well because I did A-level French and German. So I did have a year living in Europe too when I was in my early 20s.
Well, that's lovely. By the way, I love London. It's my favorite city. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
um, um, so you mentioned that your parents actually made you feel that you could do anything. And I think this is such a strong sentence because that's really what we're looking for at parents, isn't it? I think that there's empowerment and everything around it. What lessons from them have stayed with you?
So
Yeah,
I think
through your journey.
thank you for asking me that. I mean, I think my parents, in a way, I don't know if they were unique or not, but all I know is they had no idea that they were going to have a child who was disabled. And I think from the minute I was born, they were like, oh wow, and they were two like working class people who had no idea, had no experience really, from what I understand of disability. And I think they just thought, let's get on with it. But another thing that my mum said was a lot of the babies, very sadly, were left on the ward. Like their parents just couldn't handle them being disabled. And she said to the to the nurses and the doctors, "Why are all these babies being left behind? This is outrageous." And they said, well, it's just like the way that it is. And my mum said, oh, I wish I could take them all home, which is quite moving in a way. It really is. And I think that they did sort of instill this idea that you'll make loads of mistakes and there'll be loads of people around you who'll say that you can't do this, you can't do that. You just mustn't listen to them. You must follow your own path and follow your own way. And I think that is a really, really important kind of upbringing to have. And they fought very hard to get me into the local primary school and not be sort of siphoned off into some kind of send kind of school. And I don't, I don't mean that in disrespect at all to any kind of send schools or people that have to go to different schools. But it was very clear that, I had some kind of level of academicness about me. In fact, I was fluently reading by the time I was 3. Like my mum taught me how to read, and she said she did that so that they didn't really have any choice about taking me or not. I mean, the other thing I think made the difference as well was that up until the age of about 23, from about 4 to 23, I could walk as well. I couldn't walk very well, but I could still walk, and I think that was the difference as well because I wasn't a wheelchair user, and I didn't really necessarily need at that time any reasonable adjustments. So I think that's how we got round to doing it. And ironically, I went to a school, a secondary school, where there were like thousands of stairs. Most of the classes were in tower blocks. And what they used to do is give me 5 minutes extra to walk up and down the stairs with someone, like another pupil friend of mine, to carry my bags. And that was the reasonable adjustment. And I think they gave me a typist chair to sit in, and they put up a few rails in the toilet. And that was reasonable adjustment. But I was actually part of an experiment in the 1970s to put disabled children into mainstream school. And it wasn't called inclusion then, it was called something like, what was it called? Integration. But it was sink or swim. There weren't really any reasonable adjustments or anything like that. There you were, you started school, and maybe there were a few bits like the typist chair, or my PE teacher cut down a hockey stick for me because obviously the hockey sticks were really high, and there things like that, and we all kind of muddled along and made it up as we went along. I feel sure that's quite a lot of disabled people's experience. But it was certainly mine. And my mum and dad were like, you got to understand, they were like muddling along as well. But I think it was successful. It was successful. I'm not saying it wasn't hard, because sometimes it was really hard, especially when you're doing PE and you're getting slower every year at running the 100 meters, which was what was happening to me. You know, doing PE in a senior school is like, was just, yeah, it was really hard. And I wasn't very good at science or maths, and that was quite difficult. But as soon as you put me anywhere in a reading, like literature, writing my own stories, that kind of thing, even in primary school, I'd just sail away, and it just came to me. That was just very easy.
Yeah. You've mentioned that music and arts has always been a very important part of your life. What were your earliest creative influences? You've mentioned The Cure, but anything else? Any moments, sounds besides them that stand out that you can remember?
Well, I really, really liked playing music in school. I really liked singing, but I'm terrible at singing. But I like singing. And I think that when you start in like UK school, you often start with playing the recorder, and then we also did a little bit of playing the bells, the handbells in church, which I really liked as well. And then I progressed on my grandparents bought me and my sister a piano. So I progressed onto the piano and onto the clarinet. And I really, even though I knew very little about orchestral or band kind of music, I really enjoyed the atmosphere of sitting with everyone playing in the school band. And then in the older years, you went into the orchestra. So I was playing clarinet in both of those, and then we had a wind band kind of group as well, and in there we often played kind of big band stuff that would be played in the Second World War, those kinds of things. And because I did a project on the Second World War for my O levels, I think it was. They're the old GCSEs, just for anyone who doesn't know what O levels are, because they went out years ago. But and then my grandparents would influence me with all of the records that they had as well, all of the old kind of 40s and 50s kind of records, and they actually were dancers, so it was really good to like reminisce with them. But all of the time, like the rock music was playing more than, I would say, pop music. um and when I was 11, my dad and I went halves on a very influential record, Blondie's Parallel Lines. And Dad, if you're looking for the record, I've got it. I took it away when I moved house. He never asked me about it. I think he assumes that I've got it, but technically we actually share it.
That's great. Love this. Um, so your career path hasn't been linear, and I think it's like many creative journeys are like this. Looking back at it now, what really connected the dots for you? Did you ever think about this?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, especially now because I've left my big career and taken I think, a better work-life balance for myself. And I wasn't very good at languages. I was good when I was in my school, but then when you go to university and there's loads of people that are really good at languages, plus there's people who are actually French and German doing your course as well. It was just hard, and there was a lot of study involved. I'm not afraid of that, but it was like you had to pass 75% of each course. But I was at Goldsmiths, and I was at Goldsmiths in the late 80s to the early 90s. And, so many bands came out of Goldsmiths. So many of those bands were in my year at school, as well as the Young British Artists brought through by Saatchi. So there was all of that kind of influence around me. So I started getting involved like in my hall's of residence, I was like the social secretary. So I did loads of events and that. And I DJ'd once. I only did it once, but I DJ'd on one of the indie nights at Goldsmiths, and they actually offered me the Wednesday night disco, but because I absolutely point blank at that time refused to pay pop, I wouldn't take it, which is quite interesting. So yeah, there was all this stuff going around, and then when I finished university, I knew that I wasn't going to work in languages, but I did know by then that it was likely I was going to work in the arts or music. So there were two pivotal things that happened. Um, just after my exams, I saw an advert posted up on the board at Goldsmiths College looking for volunteers for a local festival called the Deptford Urban Free Festival, and I turned up to as a volunteer wanting to help out. Only the office was a squatted office in a library, and it had like a massive ladder into the roof. So I called out, and these three guys looked down, going, "Oh, hello." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, I've come to volunteer." And they were like, "Okay, we're up here." And I was like, "You're going to probably have to carry me." And so that's what they did. I mean, I know it's not great to be carried, and it's not part of the law, and it's not, but that's what you did in those days. And every day I went up this into this loft and learned everything that I needed to learn. Mainly, I didn't talk very much in the office. I just listened and followed what everybody said. But by picking up all of those things, um, it sort of absorbed it. And then obviously I was like looking for work at the same time, and I found I didn't even realize that disability arts was a thing, you know, that disabled artists were part of a political movement, and there were lots of disabled led organizations that were doing stuff out there. So I applied and got in one of my first interviews a job that would change my life, and I became shape ticket schemes assistant. And what that meant was I was responsible for booking in tickets for disabled people who wanted to see shows in London. So I learned all about access requirements and reasonable adjustments just by helping people and booking them into shows, and then negotiating with the venues making sure that they met people's needs. And it opened up a door of a whole load of other organisations at the time. So I started writing for a magazine called Disability Arts Online. No, sorry, that's who they are now. Disability Arts in London, they were then. And I started acting and writing plays for Grey Eye Theatre Company as well. I was in their youth theatre for a couple of years. So it was like a whole new political world opened up to me. And I thought, this is it. But all of the time, whatever I was working on, whether it was writing, playwriting, whatever, there was still this thing about music behind it. And I was still in bands, some of them not very good. I used to get nervous as a musician, and I just thought, I don't know if I want to be on the front line musician. I don't know if I really want to do that. So my original idea was, as well as running events, would be to be a music journalist. But that all fell apart when I led a campaign. It was against Melody Maker at the time, but I can't really say that the other press was any very much different. They were writing like really awful disablest things about disabled people and disabled artists. So a group of us got together, and we put forward this idea that this is not right, and it just shouldn't happen. And Time Out, the magazine that's still going in London, like backed us and allowed me to write a column called Manifesto, which was about disabled audiences, disabled music fans, what they wanted, what disabled artists wanted. And okay, that blew my career as a music journalist. It really did. But what it did do was sow the seeds of a project, because a couple of arts council people that worked in the music department picked up the article and found my phone number from somewhere. I came home from work with a message on my arts screen saying, "Would you like some money to do a project? We think we could create a project that improves disabled people's access to live music." And from there, that's what happened. And it was only meant to be a 1-year pilot project. Attitude is everything, but actually, I left it at 25 years. It's still going, still strong. They've just employed their new CEO. I wish them all the luck in the world, you know. So that's how that came. But it's a series of it's kind of a series of coincidences. I think as a disabled person, it's really hard to sometimes fit into a mainstream kind of job because people make all sorts of assumptions, and then there's all the stuff around public transport. It's not accessible, and there's a whole load of obstacles. But I have always worked in disability arts and disability led organizations, and people ask me, so well, you could get a career in the music, you could now do this, you can go and work for these people. And I always say, well, no, I don't really fancy that, because I'd have to start again and explain myself from the beginning. And the one thing I never had to do in any of the jobs that I had in disability arts was explain myself. And that was really important for my confidence, my self-awareness, but also awareness about other disabled people as well.
Yeah. I mean, hearing now your story, I now completely understand where the MBE is coming from. But for our audience, when you were recognized with an MBE, what did that moment mean to you personally? And what did it represent for the disabled community? What's your opinion on it? Would love to hear
So
it.
I had no idea that that was being planned by the staff and the board, and the Arts Council actually put in the nomination. So Attitudes Everything found 10 people to nominate me, because that's how it goes. And then the Arts Council backed my nomination. So I had no idea, and it does take time. And I've written nominations for other people since. So I think most people say this. There's a letter that arrives, and it really does look like a tax letter. It honestly does. And so I thought, oh God, I don't know if I want to open that. And literally, I've heard other people say this as well. So I could see everyone looking as if to say, when is she going to ever open that letter? And I opened it, and I was like, uh, I'm the Prime Minister, and I'm writing to you to ask you. And then the rest of it is a blur. I just went, what the hell is this? And I went, oh my God. Oh my God. And everyone started really laughing. I was like, oh my God, this is such a surprise, and it was lovely. It makes me feel tearful because it was lovely. And I think that it's lovely for my family and my friends, and lovely for Attitude is Everything to be recognised that way. And it's lovely, I think, for my family because, we're working class people, and stuff like that, like going to university and all those kind of things, wasn't necessarily an option for any of us. But now one of my youngest brother has been through university as well. So, but at that time it was just me, and I think it was a validation of all of that had happened. Um, but also, MBE it has connotations that are quite difficult, because obviously you become a member of the Order of the British Empire, and the British Empire is not great. Obviously, that kind of the things that happened in the past, the historical stuff is terrible. So there is that moment where you think, I wish it wasn't called Empire, but I didn't turn it down. I know people do, and there was a question apparently in the office. There was a conversation as it went. Do you think Suzanne will turn this down because she's left wing and she's socialist? She comes from a socialist family. Do you think she will turn it down? And other people said, no, we don't think so, because she'll see how important it is for the organisation. She'll put that first, which is true. I did. But I do understand that, some people don't react to it very well because it has British Empire. And I wish the BE part of it wasn't British Empire, actually. But I knew I couldn't turn it down, because for a start, my dad would absolutely, if I'd have turned it down, he would have killed me. And also, even though our family is a socialist family, we still had brought up with a lot of respect for the royal family and what they do, and what they stand for in terms of supporting the UK, and all the charitable work that they do. So I knew my dad he'd go mad if I turned it down. He'd say it was very disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. So I knew I wasn't going to turn it down. The only thing was you're not allowed to tell anyone. So I was like, look, we prepare all the press, but you can't tell anyone. But I did tell my family and I did tell my dad. And every week for about 4 months, my dad must have rung up and said, can I tell anyone now? And I'd be like, no, Dad, really, seriously, they'll take it away if you tell anyone. But he insisted. He phoned up the local paper. He got in touch with my old school. My dad was like, right, this is it. Do you know what I mean? And then when he went to ceremony, you have two people in ceremony. Well, I had three because my partner was helping with me. There's two people at the ceremony. And then we had a big dinner with the board and my family and the staff team. And also I invited the 10 people that nominated me as well for it. And my dad insisted that we bought so I've got a DVD of it. We've got loads of pictures of it. It was amazing. I met the Queen, it was amazing. Who can say that they've met the Queen, and she was a pretty amazing lady. She talks to you as if she's known you forever and she knows everything about you. And it was just an amazing experience and an amazing day for my family and the people
Oh,
closest to me.
that's so lovely to hear. I really like it. That's so lovely.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
nice. Yeah, congratulations, really. I mean, like you've said, I mean, how many people can actually say that they've met the Queen? I mean, even that is just a special achievement. But I did read stories about how she was actually really informed about every single person that she has met. And
Mhm.
she did new things that people did not expect, whether this was just good briefing or genuine interest. But still, I think this is it's a very profound way of approaching a person, I would say.
She made me feel like she was genuinely interested, and it didn't seem fake to me in what I had to say, because she said to me, I know you've improved access, but what exactly have you done? So I gave her a brief description. She was like, right,
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so nice to
yeah.
hear.
And then the hand
Let's
comes out.
touch another.
I was going to say, then the
Yeah,
hand
yeah, yeah.
comes
I
out.
saw
When
the
the hand,
ceremony. Yeah,
yeah, when the hand comes out, you have to
say.
stop. You can't say anymore. That they teach you what to say, how to bow. When the hand comes out, you stop talking. It's not your turn anymore, and you have to walk backwards. In my case, I rolled backwards and then bowed. But you can see my sister
Mhm.
laughing because she's convinced I'm going to bump into someone because I'm rolling in my chair on carpet, and she starts laughing, and you can actually see that in the DVD as well.
But I like the protocol. I mean, it's special, but it's very meaningful as well.
Definitely,
Gives it
yeah.
some kind of a context to the story for sure.
Hmm.
Let's talk about one other thing that we've mentioned already, and that is breast cancer.
Yeah.
It's an unpleasant topic, but still, I think it's important that we hold a space for these conversations. For you, it happened at the start of the pandemic, which is probably the worst time ever. We were already so down by everything. How did that experience change your day-to-day life and just your sense of purpose? What was your experience like?
So it has changed my life. I mean, you can see I'm talking now. I've just lost a tooth to treatment because the treatment can wreck your teeth as well. So I've lost my first tooth. There you go. I can't hide it. I'm waiting for it to all settle and then I can get a new tooth and everything. So what a nightmare. So yeah, so breast cancer and cancer in general has been prevalent in my family. If I take you back a little bit, so my dad is a survivor of skin cancer. My mum had breast cancer. She didn't survive. She died when I was 16. My sister had breast cancer, and then it was my turn. And because there's a family history of breast cancer, I was always at Charing Cross Hospital getting annual mammograms since I was in my late 30s, I think. And I'd had one scare before. So, yeah, it wasn't anything in the end. So my breast cancer was picked up on an annual mammogram. And then I got a call back and it said on the letter, you might have to have a biopsy as well. But I'd had one of those before, but this time there was something different. Like I didn't feel well when it came to my birthday, the last birthday I had before I got breast cancer. I just felt that something was big was going to happen and something big was going to change. And I didn't feel very well. And I had all these strange symptoms that I'd put down to being perimenopausal because they were exactly the same. And I thought, oh God, it's that. Oh, I don't really want to go through that, but you have to. So that's it. And then I got a call back, but at the call back, I was feeling very strange. And then they said, look, we're definitely going to have to do a biopsy. And they were very kind of cautious, much more cautious with me than they had been before. And I'm like talking away, but they're not really talking back. And I'm like, maybe I should read something into this or maybe I shouldn't. But it was actually at the biopsy where I completely freaked out because the radiographer said, hang on a minute, I see something in your lymph node. And I was like, and I really sort of was like, oh my God, I had a full blown panic attack. And she said, okay, I'm just gonna stop for a minute. She said, most people don't really understand what that means. And so I explained to her my history. She was like, look, breast cancer treatment is so different. We don't know what this really is. You've got to take each thing as it comes. We don't even know yet. It's very hard to find, but I think I've found something that we need to test. And she was right. It was in a very small amount in just one lymph node, but it was there. So no matter everyone telling me it'll be fine, deep down, I thought, I think I've got it. I pretty much know that I have it. This is a path that I've trodden with other family members. I think I know. So when I suppose when it came to when the surgeon like sits you down and says, right, with a breast cancer nurse, yeah, I'm sorry to say you have got breast cancer. For me, the thing was around what stage was it, and had it spread because it was in my lymph node. So they explained that it was stage one. It was a primary cancer. They thought the plan would be, they outlined the plan, which was a lumpectomy, which is they just take the lumps away and they take away more so that you get clear margins if they can, and that would be it. They had to liaise with Brompton Hospital because of my disability. It's quite hard to put me under a general anaesthetic because my lungs are they work okay, but they're in a very small space, so I have to be very careful. And they kind of outlined everything that they thought it would be, and it was like, oh dear. So I then had to sort of say, I didn't I didn't tell many people, but I told the people that were important, that really needed to know. And the surgeon from the day one was very confident about what he was doing. He was very old school. I knew he was very experienced because I looked him up, and I knew he was very experienced. And my breast cancer nurse was lovely. She would always tell me things in a very, very straight way. She would say yes or no, or, very clear, always. So went away thinking that there'd be a few more tests. I also went for a family history blood test to see if I had BRCA or
Mhm.
any other of the genes that might connect me, which would explain, I suppose, why me, my sister, and my mum had breast cancer. So the first shock was that I did not carry any kind of gene. The report came back that it said that because my mum and my sister were diagnosed at the same age, they felt that they might be connected with their breast cancer. But at the moment, with the technology that they had, mine was just coincidence. So that was the first shock. And then the second shock was the fact that my operation was cancelled because of the pandemic. And there's all sorts of connotations around that. And my breast cancer nurse had to have a very, very difficult conversation with me. And yeah, I have to acknowledge that it's as difficult for her as it was for me. But the basic thing was that it was too dangerous to take me into hospital because of, in case I caught COVID, for which I was put in the extremely clinical vulnerable group for it, because of my lungs and because of the breast cancer. And they said if you caught COVID, you'd die. But more than that, I found out that I had a DNR on me, which is a do not resuscitate. So they said that sadly, if I caught COVID or if anything went wrong in that, or I caught COVID but it was based in COVID, if I caught COVID, I wouldn't be someone that they would offer a ventilator to because my life basically wasn't worth saving. And I went nuts. I absolutely lost it. I was so angry. The things I said were really awful. But I basically said, and I said, you're doing it on purpose, blah, blah, blah. And half an hour this conversation went on for. But there was no getting out of it. That's what was going to happen. It's hard. It's really hard to think about. But I had to fight for my life at that point. And, they wouldn't even allow Stefan in the hospital with me. They did in the end, actually, because they realised he could be my primary, like we put him down as my primary carer, for want of a better word. But it was hard. It was really hard. And from then on, I thought, you think you've had to fight before, but now you really have to fight. So they kind of left me, but they didn't leave me. They were phoning me to check I was okay. Every single day for 10 days, I phoned them and said, I've read up. I think I should have tamoxifen. And I rang them every single day until a volunteer from the hospital turned up with some tamoxifen in a bag. And then 4 months later, I got a call from the surgeon saying, will you come in and see me? I think there's a lull in the pandemic. We're quiet at the hospital. We've worked out how to keep people safe. Will you come in and see me? So I came in and he said, what are you doing next week? And I was like, well, nothing, because no one's doing anything. He went, good, because I'm going to operate on you next week. The only thing that will stop it is if we can't find you a bed in ICU. But you're saying that the pandemic was a difficult time. Yeah, it was. It was horrendous. But for me, I think in some kind of ways, we'll never know if my breast cancer was worse at the end and I had a worse outcome and it affected the outcome. We'll never know that. For some people, you can trace that they didn't survive because of their treatment was stopped for definite. But for me, we'll never know. But the thing it enabled us to do was give us some thinking time to explore what the operation was like, to explore with Brompton what anaesthetic they gave me, what they needed to have on standby. And all the time as well, I was saying, look, you can operate on me. It's going to be fine. There's going to be no drama. It's going to be fine, because I was trying to like keep them calm and making sure that I would have to I mean, I definitely had one anaesthetist that said, I don't think I can put you under. And I was, well, what, you're going to have to, aren't you? Because otherwise I'm going to die. Do you know, there was like, and some other consultant rang up and said, we're going to give you a mastectomy. And I said, you don't have to give me a mastectomy for this operation. I know you don't. Oh, well, you're disabled. And I was saying, you say it doesn't matter. I said, look, I'm disabled enough and I've got a partner. You don't need to do this. And I never spoke to that person again. And then we were back on the track with the lumpectomy. So I think what happens is everything that the patient says, it gets fed into like a multidisciplinary team, and they talk about not only the physicality but emotionally where you are as well. They definitely explore all of that. And they also gave me someone at the hospital that was like an access officer, and she mainly managed situations for people um, with a learning disability, or maybe they were neurodivergent. But they gave her to me because obviously I was disabled. But also the other thing is I've got a massive like needle phobia. So whenever I have to have a needle at the hospital, she's there, or one of her colleagues is there helping me. So, and she actually came into the operating theatre. She wasn't really supposed to, but she snuck in just to make sure that everything was going okay. So they operated, and well, I woke up. I didn't need a ventilator. I was awake all night in ICU. And just like a regular lumpectomy, I went home the next day. They had to release me to a general ward for a few hours first, because you're not allowed to be discharged from ICU straight home. They never do that. But obviously, when the surgeon came round in the morning, he was like, "I hear you've had no sleep." And I was like, "Well, you can't sleep in here. It's mad." And he was like, "Yeah, I know." And then he said, "Lift up your arm." I lift up my arm. And he went, "I can't believe you're saying this, but you can go home." And he had a physio with him. She was like, "Oh, I need to see Suzanne getting in and out of her chair." And he said, "Well, look, we'll take all the lines, pick lines out. We'll do all that for her, and then you can see. But I'm telling you, she jumps in and out of that chair fine. I've seen her enough times do it in clinic. It'll be fine." So that was it. And I did do it, and I freaked the physio out because I didn't put my brakes on. And she was like, "Oh, your wheelchair brakes on." And I said, "No, I don't know anyone who puts their wheelchair brakes on." She said, "In reality, I know that, but for this situation, I would have quite liked you have done it, but it's over now." And then I just, yeah, called up Stefan, said, and a, a lovely lady who was helping me at home at the time, and I said, "Come get me. I'm ready." But on the ward, they had actually got like a room for me and Stefan to stay in together. They enabled that. They actually allowed that. Because they felt that because of what was going on in the hospital and what was happening all of the time, I definitely would need one-to-one support. And they felt that Steph was best
Yeah.
placed to give that at the time. So that was the story of it. And then since then, there's been a whole heap of things that have happened. So, there's ongoing treatment. I'm in treatment, drug treatment for up to 10 years. So I'm about halfway across now, halfway through. They decided not to give me chemotherapy, which I was fine about because it would make my quality of life worse. They had to also balance out quality of life as well, as well as, you know, how well I was going to be. And the thing is, with chemotherapy, I didn't have to have it. There was I was on the margins of I could have it, but how would that be? So it would only be over a 5-10 year period of my life. It would be 6% benefit. And because I've got a lot of the things that chemotherapy cause already for my disability, they felt it wasn't worth it. And I actually discussed it with my sister because she did go through chemotherapy as well. And we all came to the same conclusion, actually, that wasn't going to be the right road. So I'm on a different treatment plan, but treatment plans are very, very personalised. The treatment's hard. I know I only had a stage 1B, very, very primary estrogen positive breast cancer, but the treatment is hard. It makes you tired. Your hair still thins. It affects your joints, your bones. You can see my tooth. There's all sorts of things that it makes worse, and because I'm disabled, it makes those things worse. The fatigue and brain fog is unreal, and the thing is that it's trying to take the estrogen out of your body as fast as it can because my cancer's feeding on it. So I can't take anything to relieve the symptoms. I can't take HRT; it's too dangerous. So all of
Mm.
and I've got most of the I had all of the perimenopausal systems and most of the menopausal systems. It plunged me immediately into the menopause, and I have nothing really to relieve that. And
Mhm.
that's tough for people. That's really tough. And I did return to Attitude is Everything. I returned in a co-leadership position, and I loved working with my co-leader. And we had a different structure in the organisation. But after time, I felt that my brain just wasn't sharp enough anymore to cope. And also, there's when you run any kind of charity or organization, there's high stress. You've come out of a pandemic, everyone just feels totally different about things. There's a lot of mental health in the workplace to deal with. I felt completely different. I was the one that was like raring to go because I'm like, I've been given my second life here. Here I'm off, and that was too much, I think, for people to handle. And it's not anyone's fault. It's just the way that it is. But I also knew that I wasn't as sharp anymore. And I was really, really worried about making mistakes, even though I didn't really make any huge mistake that would get the organisation into trouble. I was paranoid about it. And I think that ate away at me as well as the tiredness. And then in the end, I was like, I have to step down earlier. My sort of pension comes good in a few months, and I was going to retire at that point, or step down actually, not retire. But I had to step down earlier because I was exhausted, and that was the thing. So now I've only been a freelancer for 7 months. I think it's going okay. Okay, financially it's completely different, but that's the way it is. You know, you have to give up some things, and that's it. I'm comfortably busy, which is much better for me. And I think like my family, the oncology team, everybody around me really, who is close in my life, they're all relieved, because I was worried that the stress level and the tiredness level would bring my cancer back, and I was worried about it, you know. And every cancer patient, most cancer patients are worried about recurrence. You always have to check and be mindful of things that are unusual. You always have to call them in, and it's a kind of a different kind of life. You know, you have to sort of get your head around that, and I find that quite difficult, you know, as well. But one thing the pandemic taught everybody is to live the day to day and live in the moment, and you definitely have to do that when you live with a cancer
Oh,
diagnosis.
yes.
You definitely have to do it. I also started a blog in December 2020. I started writing about being disabled and then having a cancer diagnosis and everything that I'd gone through. So it's like a different way, a different perspective of looking at cancer, and also for me to try and find other people who are disabled that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, which is incredibly difficult to do, because I could relate and empathize and, you know, get advice from a whole load of people. But what I couldn't get was the effect on my disabled body. And I've only got a couple of friends that have got the same impairment, or maybe different impairments to me, that have had breast cancer, but they had different forms of breast cancer. I've never found someone who's exactly like, and I'm still on that journey of trying to find people. But now breast cancer now picked me up as a volunteer model. So I did their fashion show. I'm often in their campaigns to remind them that they have to, you know, uh, make sure that disabled people are represented in all their campaigns. I've just started working with a bit with Macmillan as well. Dr. Liz O'Riordan, she invited me to co-author a chapter in the Complete Guide to Breast Cancer. It's the first time that disability's ever been covered at all. And that was like, she basically, her and Professor Tricia Greenhalgh, who co-write the book, they said, we're updating the edition. They put a tweet out. What do you think's missing? And I cheekily said, disability, shall I write a chapter for you? And they tweeted straight back and said, please do. And then they direct messaged me with their Liz, with her personal email. We took it from there, and it was as easy as that, you know.
Yeah.
And since I've been freelance, I'm able to work on different projects, and so I'm very involved in the public um, patient involvement activities with Imperial College and Imperial NHS and Imperial Cancer Research UK, because I'm surrounded by it where I live in Ladbroke Grove, North Kensington, and I'm on the edge of Shepherd's Bush. So they're all in this area. So I kind of um, do interviews with students, or look at students' work, or research sometimes on, you know, the effect of cancer and disabled people, and I talk about it in different spaces. And I'm on their EDI Kickstarter program, their Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Kickstarter program as well. And that's been a way for me to kind of to sort of feedback really, and say to Imperial, thank you so much for like saving my life, because I did sort of warn them at the beginning, like, anything you say to me, I'm more likely to react with anger than be really upset, because that just I'm a bit of a diva, really. And I said to my breast cancer nurse, look, I'm really sorry about some of the things I did and said. And she went, nah, she said, you're all right. So you don't have to apologize. She said, to be honest, that's how we knew you'd get through the treatment, because you just asked us so many questions and just hounded us from day one. And we had to, it made us really think about what we were doing. So she said, we actually really enjoyed working with you. I thought they must have thought, oh God, get this girl out of here. Do you know what I mean? But one thing I did say to my surgeon, I said, am I the most complicated person that you've ever worked on? And he went, no, you're not. You're the
Yeah.
second most complicated person I've worked on. But I got that person through the surgery and the treatment as well. So there you go. He was brilliant. He's
Oh,
retired
that's
now.
lovely to
He's
hear.
retired now, but he's
Susanne,
brilliant.
no, I'm really glad. I mean, the whole story is really, really inspiring, and I think that it also shows that it is a little bit about intuition, isn't it? Because you mentioned like during the conversation many times, like how you already knew, and I think that this is also a little bit of um, to say to our listeners and viewers, listen to yourself and listen to your body. And I think that this is it should be taken into consideration probably more as well, because I think that we are often so out of tune with our bodies and our minds, and we try to ignore things that are quite obvious, I would say. One
Yeah.
last sentence from you, because I think that you really, I mean, thank you so much for bringing your story and your strength and your clarity. It was really an amazing conversation, and I really loved it. One last sentence for our viewers and listeners.
One last sentence. Well, folks, what can I say? I mean, I just think life's for enjoying yourself. I mean, my mum used to say that to me all the time, just enjoy yourself. My nan, when I was younger, if I wasn't going out enough, she'd say, now come on, you've got to get yourself out there. And they were big party people. So come on, just enjoy your life, do as much as you can, connect with people, be creative, have a great time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's
It
okay.
was lovely having you as a guest. Really, I enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Thank you.